Black Lives Matter, the organization, is facing backlash after tax documents show how the nonprofit is spending its donations. And it goes well beyond the millions of dollars on mansions that we already knew about. The organization's filing for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 reveal nearly $1 million went to the father of co-founder Patrisse Cullors. Her brother was also paid $840,000 for security for the group, even though he had zero law enforcement experience. But just $200,000 was given to the Trayvon Martin Foundation. Just last month, Cullors had this to say about tax filings after the organization's purchase of a $6 million Los Angeles mansion was exposed. Watch.
I actually did not know what 990s were before all of this happened. Something's being weaponized against us that many people don't even know and honestly don't care about. It is such a trip now to hear the word, the term 990s. I'm like, ugh, it's like triggering.
It's triggering to have to comply with state and federal laws, Shannon.
Well, and they have pushed back a lot of times saying that this is you know, the criticism is deeply rooted in racism or sexism. One of the most interesting and exposing articles came from a black author who talked about how he was raised by a single black woman, how he himself has had guns of the police trained on him. He said, I didn't want to go where these, facts were taking me, but I had real concerns in writing about this. He wasn't, some right-wing conservative person who was writing about this. What gets me is that we find out the average donation was about $30. So think about the person who thought, I want to help. I want to help these families. I feel we're wronged and I want to stand in the gap and do something good. Those are tiny little donations that they ended up at $90 million. There's an interesting piece in the Washington Post. It was an opinion piece by Karen Attiah, who is a black female columnist over at the Post. She said this: the lack of transparency is a serious betrayal. We cannot defend a BLM national leadership that arrogantly refuses to be accountable to black victims and communities. So a lot of the criticism is coming from within the black community, who says we need to be able to stand behind this, but you're putting us in a position where we can't.
That's right. Joe Concha, last night, Geraldo was talking about that exact phenomenon. He said he called it poverty pimps. He said these are groups that he's seen throughout his journalist career, that they would capitalize on the guilt and compassion of others that saw a need in a certain arena, that donated small amounts incrementally to help affect change. And then groups would seize on that. I mean, we saw that these expenditures are mind-boggling. Almost $1 million for private jets. About $1 million to her baby daddy for event production. That person is selling $145 sweatshirts on his website, and people were donating in average increments of $30. And the families of these victims in these certain arenas have received $200,000. And it's really not about the money, but the blatant hypocrisy between the two, and the fact that there was actually no compassion, no generosity extended whatsoever by this group that now refuses to be held accountable and hides behind labels like racist and triggered.
Poverty pimps are just a classic con, right? And that's what Black Lives Matter is. It's just like the Lincoln Project. It's just like Bernie Madoff investments now at this point, all with the purpose of making the very top of their organizations rich. And it begs the question once again, does Black Lives Matter, did it have a positive effect on the black community? Because then when you look at the numbers here, all right, the murder rate in the black community jumped 43% in 2020. That is the same year, as you mentioned, that they raised $100 million from. So how many yachts can they water ski behind? How much is enough? And now I wonder, all those people that you mentioned, Shannon, as far as what they donated, I'd be pretty angry right now. And then I'd be calling Saul, I think, and calling my lawyer and saying, you know what? Time for a lawsuit, because my money is not going where I thought it was, guys.
And the organization separate from the movement that was really affecting awareness for social justice causes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to kind of get into who's been harmed by this, think about those local organizations who thought that they were part of something. I mean, let's face it, the national organization hasn't really done much. They weren't organizing against all of the young people who were shot and killed over a couple of summers. Right? Not just in the protesting, but I mean, the crime in Chicago has been crazy and quite violent and deadly. So where is BLM, the organization? Where are the protests in Chicago saying no more Black lives taken? Where are they? Now, that would be a top-down situation, but then you have all of these other local arms of the organization, and how disappointed they must be.
Because
right?
they had the right, they had.
Well, and I would imagine they have to defend it now. I'm sure they'll be looked at too. And they'll have some of the receipts to show what didn't get spent on, right? They'll be part of the story of the money grab that the people at the top of the BLM organization were making. I mean, baby daddy got a shop, but come on. Right? And at one point, in that same interview, I believe, because she's wearing the same thing, Patrice Cullors said that, you know, her family members, some of them had skill sets. That's why she gave them $1.2 million.
Right.
Those are big skills. You got to wonder now if there's going to be an IRS investigation.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, Kayleigh, so I was going to say that. So to Harris's point, just from this year alone, up to 8 out of every 10 homicide victims in the city of Chicago are young African American men. And we have heard nothing from that national organization. And yes, to Joe's point, this is the tip of the iceberg because this is them complying. It's basically an audit to maintain their nonprofit status. This hasn't even touched, actually, the IRS civil or criminal division.
Right.
But based on what we know thus far, I wouldn't hold my breath that there wouldn't be one of those investigations because I think one's coming.
Yeah, I imagine there will be. I mean, $970,000 to the baby daddy. I think it was $840,000 to her brother. And then we learned from the Daily Mail her sister, mother, and brother were all employed by the organization. So this was a family affair. And this is totally separate and apart from the story that we've talked about before and which was aggregated by the New York Post about the $12 million spent on luxury property in Toronto and in Los Angeles. They gave this $8 million grant to out-of-country expenses. And I think it was how much? $6.3 million went to buy a mansion in Toronto. The $1.7 million remaining was unaccounted for. I'd like to know where that went, along with all the other money. I mean, these are very serious questions. There should be an investigation. Emily, hopefully there is, because people gave $30. That's not a lot of money, and it was a sacrifice for many, and unfortunately they were betrayed by an organization.
I think we can expect an investigation, and hopefully with that then we'll get some answers, and hopefully there'll be some accounting for this.